Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to another video by ILLY'S called Why Sunday School Scared Me. I've personally never been to Sunday school. I've been to church but never Sunday school. If anyone out there watching has been to Sunday school, let me know in the comments. What's the experience like? Did you enjoy it? Obviously from the title, we can assume that ILLY'S experience with Sunday school wasn't very positive. But we'll see what's going on here in just a second. The link to the original video will be in the description below. Please like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get watching this.
Hi, my name is Alyssa.
Hey, Alyssa.
And I have a complicated relationship with my faith.
Okay.
To give you some context, I was raised Christian, specifically Lutheran.
Okay,
This flavor
Lutheran.
of Christianity actually started years ago when a Catholic guy named Martin Luther
I
had
think I've heard of
95
this.
problems with the Catholic Church, stapled him to the door, and peace be with you'd out to start his own church.
Okay.
And yeah, that's what I learned in Sunday school, along with the usual God loves you no matter what, always stuff. Point is, the church I went to was as boring and basic as you can imagine. So
All right, it's nice that we got that little bit of history, a little bit about Martin Luther. Good to know. And I think what Illy's saying is true, though. Like, sometimes, like, it seems like some churches can be just kind of like old school and just not have a lot of flair to them, you know? They just like bare bones messaging, which obviously it's important to spread the message of your faith. But at the same time, especially for the younger generations, try to spice it up a little bit somehow. You know, maybe get some music or something. Just make it a little bit more enjoyable.
why did I have yelling matches with my parents about me not wanting to go?
Why?
Well, one day I reached an age where things were starting to get confusing.
Like
If
what?
the only way to get into heaven is by knowing God, but my cat can't go to church with us, is she gonna go to... If God has a plan for everyone and everything happens because of him, why did he break my friend's arm? If
Wow,
God created the
okay.
Earth 2,000 years ago, but my science teacher said dinosaurs lived on the Earth millions of years ago,
Yeah, you see, I can understand that. Like, as someone who is like kind of like more rational minded myself, it's just like hard to like reconcile some things. Like, especially like the last bit with like dinosaurs, especially since you know they like lived for like well over 100 million years. Like I think like 180 million years. And you know, technically they're still alive because you know birds exist and they're dinosaurs. But that's not the point. The point is I can kind of understand like sometimes when you get like confronted with like outside information, it can kind of like mess with your perspective a little bit about your faith. So it seems like that's what's going on here with Illy, but also about like you know about potentially her cat not getting to heaven and God being in control of everything, and yet bad things still happening. I'll admit it's complicated, and I don't really have the answers for them, unfortunately. I'm not sure most people do. I think you just gotta grin and bear it and just try to make the best out of the situation that you're in.
and what do I put on my science test? Alyssa, please, enough with the questions. Can't you just accept that you are God's child and he loves you? I know some kids can be disruptive little know-it-alls, but my questions were genuine. I
That's
was a
good.
God-loving Christian girl through and through. I would sing Jesus Loves Me when I was scared of the dark. I invited my friends to Palm Sunday, and we made a ton of those little crosses.
Okay.
And when kids would argue on the playground about who was the best at kickball, I would say, actually, God is the best. He's the best at...
Well, that's a new one. Never seen someone like try to use God to like settle a schoolyard argument. It's interesting that even though Illy had some questions about Christianity growing up, she still cared and still believed. Because but I think that's an important thing to recognize. Lots of people, especially really conservative people, seem to think that questions equal immediate like disloyalty or like unqualification for being a Christian or whatever your religion happens to be. You know, like you can't question scripture. You know, you're going to the bad place. You know, and I don't think that that's the case at all. Questioning is a perfectly normal thing to do, especially when it comes to deep philosophical stuff, especially when you potentially throw science into the mix. So, you know, if you have a faith, don't try to like rationalize it too much. Don't try to, you know, pick it apart too much. But don't be blindly loyal either. You know, use some critical thinking skills.
Everything. Well, she's
Oh,
right.
yeah,
I thought
she's
Jimmy was
right.
pretty good. I wasn't looking for a gotcha moment in Sunday school.
All
I
right.
was just a kid with questions about my religion and how it intersected with the rest of my life. I just
Okay.
wanted to know what the heck to put on my science test. But I quickly learned that asking these kinds of questions only made me a troublemaker to teachers and a weirdo to my classmates.
You know, it's kind of like what I was saying before. It's like asking questions like in a religious setting can often make you be viewed as like a troublemaker, a nonconformist, or potentially a non-believer. Since it seems like critical thinking can really stray you from religion or make you have doubts about your religion, so the people who are in power in religious communities don't want that. They want people to stay on the straight and narrow and do as they're told. But, sometimes you just can't help it. People are naturally curious. So I think you have to find a balance between questioning things and accepting things, because going too far either way isn't really a good thing.
So eventually, I stopped asking and just sat alone to wonder what to make of the world. Things
Oh,
got even more confusing when I started something called confirmation class. In the
confirmation
church
class?
I went to, fifth graders would begin attending confirmation class every Wednesday night for 2 years straight, where they would read
Okay.
through the Bible as a class, listen to lectures from their youth leaders, discuss important chapters, themes, people, and be sent home with Bible verses to memorize by next class.
Okay.
After those 2 years were up, they'd turn in a one-page written paper titled What Jesus Means to Me and recite all 10 commandments as well as all 66 books of the Bible in order from
Wow.
memory to the head pastor.
Oh, that's like some dedication to be able to keep this up for 2 years. But at the same time, that potentially could lead to a reduction in critical thinking skills. Like if you have to do this for 2 years, like every Wednesday for 2 years straight, that potentially be problematic, especially when you're growing up, because that's the time when you're able to learn the most and adapt your thinking the most. And while I think it's important to understand your faith, I think being exposed to it so frequently in such a structured manner might not be the best thing for a young developing brain.
If they passed, they would confirm their faith at confirmation graduation,
All
allowing
right?
them to accept the iconic little wafer and tiny glass of wine slash
Hmm.
grape juice, if you prefer, every Sunday during communion, which is a
Already?
huge deal. Communion is a very special ceremony that acknowledges the sacrifice Jesus made for those who are faithful to him. This is a
Yeah, I'd go to
massive
that.
milestone for someone growing up in this faith. And as far as I could tell, all the other kids at my church were ready to begin. But
Cool.
I was not.
Hmm.
I was still struggling to make sense of it all.
This makes a lot of sense. Let's be real. Not every religion is for everyone, and not even the religion that you're born into, that your parents raise you in. It might not be for you. Maybe you feel comfortable in a different faith or a complete lack of faith. Because everybody's wired differently. Not everyone thinks or feels the same way about stuff. So that's one part of some or actually probably a good chunk of religions that is a little bit iffy to me. It's just it's hard how some of them are always gung ho, this is the right way, our religion and no one else's. And I'm but there's probably hundreds, if not thousands of religions that have existed. So how can we be sure that this one is right? And to exclude other people just because they don't follow the same faith as you, I don't know. That kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth, to be honest, sometimes.
Begged my parents not to sign me up for it, but they saw it as an important step in my young Christian journey. This was part of every kid's path in our church, so why should I sit out? I was a Christian, right?
Hmm.
I want to make it clear here, many other religions do this kind of thing too for their faith,
All
and
right, good to
some
know.
kids love it. And although I desperately wanted to love it too, that just wasn't my experience. I
Okay.
couldn't convince my parents to not sign me up, so I figured I'll just make the most of it, you know?
All right,
Maybe
good
confirmation
call.
class will help fill in the gaps. Or at the very least, if I do all the assignments right, maybe then I'll feel like a real Christian.
Okay.
At first, I was able to memorize each homework passage and recite them at the next class.
That's
But
good.
eventually, the passages got longer, or harder, or we had to learn more than one, and I
Okay.
struggled with it. My parents tried to help me study, and they reminded me how good I was at remembering lines for theater, so remembering Bible verses was basically the same thing, right?
It's nice to see Illy's parents trying to help out, but I'm not sure that's the best analogy. Because theater, it seems that Illy did that for fun, while this seems like more of a requirement for religion, which might not, transfer over. The same feelings and enthusiasm might not transfer. So this potentially could be a problem.
Well, maybe for others, but not for me.
All right?
In theater, my lines were part of one story that ended after about 100 pages, and
Okay.
even if I did have paragraphs of words to memorize and recite, I had months to learn it. The Bible
Cool.
is over 1,000 pages, has a lot more stories than your average grade school play, and
Definitely.
some are written in Ye olde English.
Yep.
And I had to memorize it all in a week. I
Wow,
tried my best to remember and recite, but
all right, yeah, that's insane. Trying to memorize a significant portion of the Bible or any holy text within a week? That just seems messed up. I mean, I don't even think like priests and rabbis and other religious figures have it all memorized, and they've been doing their job for decades. You really expect like a middle school or high school student, however old she is during this time, you really expect a student to be able to memorize all this? That's just really setting them up for disappointment, if I'm gonna be honest.
I inevitably fell behind my other classmates.
That's a bummer.
The first year passed, and things only got harder. I
Really?
started getting bullied in 6th grade, and
Oh,
it was hard
that
to make
sucks.
friends. And although there weren't any mean girls like that in confirmation class,
That's good.
it was still pretty lonely.
Oh,
I remember 2 girls specifically who were really chill, and I'd consider them my friends.
awesome.
But as for the other kids, I guess they had already made all the friends they wanted to make. And so when I saw my 2 friends hanging out with the other kids during retreats or events, I'd just say, hey, I'll catch up with you guys later, and find a quiet spot to sit and think.
Aw. Aw, that sucks. And you know what? Actually, now I think about it, this whole scene here, I think I remember seeing it in like her video explaining reasons I should have realized I was autistic or something like that. I reacted to like a year ago. And I think this is like the same setting. Cross in the middle of the lake, this little sandy beach right here. Yeah, I think I remember this, but I definitely understand where she's coming from, because if your 2 close friends are hanging out with people that kind of ignore you, you kind of don't want to intrude. You just, try to be by yourself for a while and not intrude. But that sucks because you end up being lonely. So hopefully Illy can reconnect with her 2 friends soon.
These weird social inconsistencies were compounding with the stress and confusion I already felt at church.
Ah, that
If
sucks.
Jesus says to love our neighbor like ourselves,
Yeah?
why are some kids nice and some kids mean?
That's a great
I
question.
wanted to talk to someone about how I felt, but I was scared that if I asked the wrong questions, I'd be shut down again or ostracize myself even more.
Oh,
It was then
no.
I started to wonder, maybe I just wasn't a good enough Christian.
Oh.
And that's why life was so hard.
Illy, I really don't think that was the case. I think that in this particular case, it's probably just because of like I said, the video that I reacted to earlier. It's the fact that you are autistic, and I don't think that she was diagnosed yet, but you're autistic in a largely non-autistic world where
Conformity and following the rules are to be expected, and different ways of thinking and being are largely frowned upon.
it's gotten better in recent years, but it's not perfect yet. Lots of neurodivergent people still fall through the cracks and are still bullied and stuff. So I think that's really why things are challenging, I think in a broader sense. But maybe it can apply to Illy's religious difficulty as well.
Because no one else seemed to have these kinds of troubles.
Oh,
But by this time, I had come to learn what many Christians know.
what?
Prayer is powerful. So
True.
I prayed every night for the bullying in school to stop, and I prayed for the Bible homework in confirmation class to make sense.
All right.
I figured if my prayers were answered, I would fit in, and I would have more friends, and I could finally be a good Christian.
That's a
But
nice goal.
no matter how many times I prayed, or how long, or how hard, it just didn't seem to be working. And when you're
That is a serious bummer. I think lots of people who have like any religious background can relate to this, because we've all been through some negative stuff. We've all been through some heavy stuff, and we've prayed to whatever deity we believe in. We pray to like make it better or make it go away. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes things just keep on going. It's like on autopilot, and you get frustrated. And some people think that, this is evidence that, no God or supernatural entity exists. Some people think, well, suffering makes us better and able to experience joy more fully. And it's just kind of a confusing thing. So the only thing I can say is just don't get too frustrated too quickly if things just don't instantaneously change because you pray. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You just have to roll with the punches and try your best to adapt.
10 or 11-year-old kid left to figure out this big of a problem all on your own, you may come to the same conclusion that I did.
What was that?
Maybe God just doesn't like me.
Oh, no.
My anxiety about church only increased from here on out.
That's gotta be the worst feeling ever. Like, no matter how old you are, but especially as like a 10 to 11-year-old, coming to the idea that the almighty creator of the universe doesn't like you or doesn't care about you, that's gotta make you feel like the most insignificant person in existence. No one should have to experience that. No one should ever have to think that, which, it's inevitable. You just think badly about yourself from time to time because nobody has perfect self esteem all the time. But to think that God specifically dislikes you out of the billions of people that exist, that's just gotta do major damage to someone's self esteem. I don't wish that on my worst enemy.
I couldn't help but feel like there was something inherently spiritually wrong with me, as
Oh
if I would
no.
never be worthy enough to be a real Christian, no matter how
Oh,
hard I
that
tried.
sucks.
I know now as an adult that I'm not the only person who's ever struggled with their faith or beliefs, but as a
Yep.
kid, no one else around me spoke about their problems, and I had learned by now that questions like that only annoyed people, so I really did feel like I was the only person in the
Oh
entire world
no.
to ever have doubts about their faith.
What she is saying, she is just spitting straight facts right there. And that's true no matter whether you're talking about Christianity or Judaism or really any religion. There's always going to be people who struggle with faith and struggle with thinking that they truly belong or that they're good enough for God or whatever the situation is. Everyone's been through that. I've been through it quite a few times growing up. And it is not fun. But I think it's compounded by the fact that Illy, she's neurodivergent. So naturally, she thinks differently anyway and experiences things differently anyway. And so she's probably getting bullied just for other reasons as well. And so it feels like the world is against people who are different. So it's understandable why Illy thinks like this.
Which only reinforced the idea that I was some blasphemous, troublemaking creature destined to hell from birth.
You're
I felt
not
like it was only a
blasphemous.
matter of time until I got kicked out of confirmation class for
Oh,
not
jeez.
keeping up, or kicked out of church for not being a good enough Christian. My
That's
anxiety
terrible.
got worse and worse. I couldn't concentrate on learning the scripture. I dread going to church on Sundays, and every
Understandable.
Wednesday I'd just sit there sweating and trying not to cry when the teacher would inevitably say, "So, I see you had trouble again memorizing this week's passage."
Oh no, the
I
stress
was
that
given
is.
lots of opportunities every week to redo.
This has got to be the worst, where you have like all this internal stress, like worried you're not good enough, worried you're going to be kicked out of church, and you have the external stress of having to try to like memorize all these Bible verses. And so that just cannot be good. I mean, we can obviously see Illy's sanity is depleting rapidly. And I would be very concerned if like I saw a kid going through this in real life, like in real time. So hopefully someone picked up on Illy's distress because this is not okay.
Last week's homework and the week before's. I even got special one-on-one time with the youth group leader to
All
help me
right.
get these words through my thick, stupid skull.
You're not
She was
stupid.
super sweet, super patient, never said anything mean to me or anyone. She just wanted to help.
That's nice. That's good.
I was already giving it everything I had and still failing.
Oh.
There weren't any grades taken, but there also weren't any stories of kids failing the class either. So, as my final year of confirmation class was coming to a close, I began to prepare myself for the inevitable. I
What?
was going to be the first kid in the entire world to ever fail confirmation class.
You see, I think all of us go through this. Like when we're struggling with something that other people seem to just do just like that, all of us think that we're the worst and that we're going to be failures and that everyone in the world will know and that we will be infamous as the ones who failed. And the vast majority of the time, no one really cares. No one will look back and be like, take a look, Illy's the one who failed. Let's point and laugh. No one's like that. Very few people are like that, I should say. Almost no one cares. Everybody's worried about their own stuff going on in the world. So it's not nearly as big a deal as you think it is. If you're struggling with anything, just be chill about it if you can. And just try to move on to the next thing and pick yourself up.
And that felt like the ultimate sign from God that I was a failure.
You're not a
But
failure.
what was I supposed to do? I couldn't drop out. My parents wouldn't let me back then. Why would they let me now? And even if I was able to drop out, then what? If I didn't confirm my faith, then I'd never get to participate in communion. Therefore, I'd definitely be sent to hell. To make matters worse,
no.
I finally memorized the 10th commandment.
Whoa.
Do not covet. Our youth group leaders explained that covet basically means to want something very, very badly.
Okay.
I understand now as an adult that would translate to don't be jealous of others, just be grateful for what you have.
Okay.
Comparison is the thief of joy. That kind of thing. But as
All right.
a kid, I thought that my desperate desire to not be bullied in school or to not feel like an alien in confirmation class was me coveting
What?
and breaking a command.
Man, that's just horrible. All Illy wanted was to just feel like a, quote, a normal kid and fit in with the other students. Thinking that she's breaking a commandment, that's just gotta be horrible for little Illy's psyche. I can't imagine the type of stress that's going through their head when they were experiencing this as a kid. That's just terrible.
In case you don't know, do not murder is number 6. So I
Alright.
thought I was just as bad as, if not worse than, a murderer.
No,
When
you're
the
not.
2 years were up, I went into my pastor's office with the loudest, heaviest beating heart. I was able to recite all 10 commandments, but
Good.
since I was convinced I was guilty of breaking one, it just made my chest hurt even more.
Oh.
I felt like such a fraud, especially when my brain went blank after 2nd Chronicles, and the pastor had to
Oh,
walk
no.
me through the remaining 52 out of 66 books of the Bible.
That's gotta be the worst. When you already feel like a failure and the pastor has to help you out. But what Illy was saying before, feeling like a total fraud, I think most of us feel like that in many aspects of our life. Whether we're talking about a career or our faith, or if we're actually neurodivergent enough to receive disability or assistance or accommodations or whatever the situation is. All of us understand what it's like to feel like a fraud or an imposter. But the vast majority of the time, you are where you're supposed to be in life. You're not faking it. You're just trying to live your best life, trying to be yourself, and just trying to make do with what you have. So try not to guilt trip yourself and just try to make the best of whatever situation you're in.
And even though he said my essay was great, that praise made me feel even more guilty. Because
Oh,
I didn't
no.
mean any of those words. I just wrote down all the nice stuff I overheard at church about what Jesus means to other people and literally prayed that my teachers wouldn't notice.
Okay,
So, that
understandable.
prayer was answered. But my teachers had to know just as well as I did that Jesus meant nothing to me.
Oh,
When it was
wow.
finally over and I met my parents in the hallway, I was waiting to be sentenced to another year of confirmation class.
Okay,
But to my surprise, the pastor told my family that I passed and
that's
I'd
great.
be graduating with all the other kids next Sunday.
That's good. At least the stress of potentially failing is now gone out of Illy's life. But I can just tell that it's not going to be smooth sailing. I mean, just look at Illy's face. That face is the face of someone who still has a lot of internal trauma and a lot of self-doubt going on. So I think that Illy will still feel like a fraud and not like a real Christian, even after confirmation.
So go get a white dress and we'll see you there. And of course, my parents were so proud and excited, and they threw me a big party, and I
Awesome.
stood with my class in front of the whole congregation to confirm my faith with a smile.
That's good.
But through every second of it, I felt like such a heathen. I didn't deserve to
yeah.
pass that
Understandable.
class. I didn't deserve that grace. I didn't deserve to be there at all. And I know. Illy, this is the moment where a kid like you could see what those Christian values look like in action. Maybe that's why.
Yeah, it's like I was saying earlier. Illy just feels like, she's a fraud. She didn't deserve any of it because even though Illy passed, you can tell the message wasn't like solidified in their heart. You know what I mean? Like they didn't really think they deserved like the grace. They didn't think they deserved passing. So it's really just like a bittersweet type of thing, I guess.
He let you pass. And maybe you're right. Maybe that's what he and all the youth group leaders and heck, even Jesus was aiming for.
Okay.
But that's just not how I experienced it.
All right.
This journey didn't open my heart to Jesus. It
Okay.
just turned my confusion up to 11.
Wow.
I tried to grasp the holy conclusion that all of my struggling and anxiety and self-blame was some kind of secret weapon to fill my Christian faith tank.
It's kind of similar to what I was saying before. Like sometimes some people think that we go through negative stuff like pain and suffering and loss just to make our faith stronger, to turn things over to God and make it so that, He's in control and you can appreciate things more once you experience some suffering. Yet, obviously, it doesn't work like that for everyone. Some people just go through some negative stuff and just dwell on it, or it makes them more confused, which I guess in a way is kind of what Illy's going through right here, because even though Illy passed the test and got confirmed as a Christian, obviously she's still having doubts.
But this experience just didn't do it for me.
All right?
It didn't make me feel like a child of God with a strong testimony. It made me feel like a Furby getting hydraulic
Furby.
pressed to see if the voice box still worked. I felt guilty arguing with my parents about not going to church, and I felt guilty going to church.
Oh,
I needed to
man.
step away
Just couldn't
and learn
win.
what the heck Jesus actually means to me and no one else. So I did. As
All
soon
right.
as I was done with confirmation class, I stopped going to church.
All right?
It wasn't until many years later.
You know, I'm glad Illy took that step. I think that's very important for, like, any form of religion. If you're involved in any religion, you can't just go through the motions just because, you know, it's what your parents want, or it's what your community wants, or what you think that you're supposed to do. You know, you have to realize, you have to think for yourself and be like, what does this religion actually mean to me? What does Jesus mean to me? What does this all mean? Is it really for me? How am I supposed to live? Like, in a way that makes sense based on this religion. Or in some cases, even without religion. Is religion for me? Or in some cases, is it not for me? That's all the things we gotta ask. Because the way I see it, blindly going through life, just with any sort of faith, that can potentially be problematic as just like going through life with like a negative, cynical attitude and thinking there's like no great meaning to life. You know what I mean? So I think you just have to do a little bit of a balance. If you have a faith, try to understand it. Try to understand what it means to you. And if it just doesn't fit, then try to find another faith or find something else that just does make sense. Because there's no one size fits all for being a successful person. So just try to figure out what makes sense to you.
That I learned my experience was a mild case of religious trauma.
Ooh,
Religious
boy.
trauma occurs when a person's religious experience is stressful, degrading, dangerous, abusive, or damaging.
You know, I think I've heard about this. And I've heard like that's a good reason why lots of people leave various religions. It's especially it's been especially talked about when it comes to LGBTQ plus folks, because in many religions, they're not exactly LGBTQ plus friendly. You know, lots of people view being gay or bi or trans as inherently sinful and evil. And obviously, if that's part of your identity, you're not going to want to be part of a religion that looks down on you as some kind of lesser, evil, subhuman type of person. You know, you want to be in a group that actually respects you as you are. So it's understandable why this happens. It shouldn't happen, but it's understandable why it does.
And this type of trauma can unfold over a series of stages.
Okay.
Step 1, a person experiences a trauma. It could be
All right.
related to their religion, but it doesn't have to be. So for me, getting bullied in school. Step 2,
All
the
right.
trauma has religious implications, meaning your religion starts to play a role in how you get through it. So
All right.
for me, I prayed for the bullying to stop, but the bullying didn't stop no matter.
You know, I'm glad that Illy is taking the time to break this down step by step, because I've heard of religious trauma. I know it really messed with people's heads, but I didn't realize there were actually steps involved. I just kind of thought it kind of like all happened at once. I was unaware that there were like steps to actually solidify it and make it like more ingrained into your psyche. So I'm glad for the little bit of education that I'm getting right now.
How much I prayed. And step 3, the response from the religious community may re-traumatize you.
Oh, boy.
For me, that was knowing from an early age that questioning my faith would lead to teachers getting mad at me and my peers excluding me. Therefore,
that
when
sucks.
my prayers weren't working, I internalized it and came to some very unhealthy conclusions about my self-worth.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. All 3 steps just make total sense. And it's understandable why Illy went through it. And I think that it can apply to lots of people within various religions too. And not for the exact same reasons, but for lots of different reasons, people go through this. And I just hope that no one who's watching this has gone through it. But unfortunately, I think probably a good chunk of people who see this video have. So it looks like Illy's about to give us some information about where you can seek help. So let's see what Illy has to offer.
Like more information or support regarding religious trauma, check the links in the description for help. I
Okay.
say my experience was mild because a lot of it was indirect. Religious
right.
trauma usually comes up in discussions around the troubled teen industry, religious leaders being inappropriate with kids,
Oh,
or of
jeez.
course, being LGBTQ in a religious family.
Yeah, just kind of I was talking about like LGBTQ plus folks, but yeah, the troubled teen industry. I think I've heard about that. It's like this like pseudo scientific idea where if you have kids who are troublemakers, like they're using illegal substances or they're not paying attention in school or they're shoplifting, what have you, I think the basic idea is you send them to like an ultra strict religious slash labor camp and you try to like cure them of their bad behavior with like intense like attack therapy or labor, and more often than not, it just makes them more troubled and filled with anxiety and self-loathing. So, anyone out there who has potentially a troubled teen, just
talk to them. Don't send them off to one of those wackadoo places, okay?
it won't end well.
Community. Again, as far as I know, the church I went to didn't do or believe those horrible things.
That's good.
I'd like to think most religious people don't. However, I did grow up in the American South, so I did hear prejudiced things being said by other kids and even teachers at school more frequently than supportive things. And they would
That's just really, really sad. I mean, it's bad enough when adults think these bad things, these like hateful things, but then they encourage the kids to say it. Because let's be real, if you're like a kid or a teenager, you're kind of ignorant to how things work. And if you do like one like microaggression towards a group of people, that doesn't inherently make you a bigot. That just makes you misguided. But if you're an adult, you had to really learn that. And as an adult, you should do your best to make sure kids know better than you. That they are more moral and compassionate than you are. You should not be spewing hateful garbage.
often cite Bible verses to prove their point. This
Oh,
behavior
no.
within what was supposed to be my same religious community only pushed me away from my faith even more.
That's
As I grew
understandable.
older, I saw these debates weren't just happening on the playground. Adults have these arguments too, all the time about who's doing religion the best, who's doing it wrong, who's twisting God's words, and who
Illy has a great point because let's be real, religion can be kind of complicated. I've heard that there's like thousands of various denominations of Christianity alone. And God only knows how many other groups of other religions exist as well. So it's kind of confusing, like, how do we tell that this way is the right way? And how can we say that all these other ways are inherently wrong or bad or evil? How can anyone really say that? It's just kind of confusing more than anything. And it makes the people who have these debates, in my opinion, they look like idiots. They look like self-righteous jerks, thinking that their way is the right way, when really there's no absolute way to tell. You can't prove or disprove any religion, because it's all faith-based. There's no real way to figure it out. So the way I see it, it's just better to just let people choose whatever religion they want and don't harass them, okay? Harassing people over their faith has never ended well for anybody.
is or isn't going to happen, which only made me more confused. Because what
Understandable.
if all this time I was doing the wrong religion?
That's a
What if
valid
all my friends
concern.
and my family picked the wrong God to worship? What if we
Ah.
all end up in hell, or whatever the correct word for eternal punishment is? Or if that's even part of it? I don't know. The only thing propelling me to find
And that's understandable why Illy was so confused. I mean, seeing all these things on TV and all the disagreements that people who really supposedly know religion the best, pastors and bishops and folks who've been involved in their faith for years, they're having arguments with each other. I can only imagine what it's like for someone who's younger, like middle school age or as a young adult. That's gotta really be confusing and really cause a lot of stress. So it's understandable that Illy had this type of reaction.
my faith was fear and shame.
Oh,
And I'll tell you now, if those hard feelings you hold against yourself aren't helped, they will hurt. The point of this
Mhm.
video is not to stir up arguments in my comment section about who's right and who's wrong.
Okay,
The
good
point
to
of this
know.
video is to say, hey, if you don't feel comfortable at your place of worship, it's okay to reflect on that and talk to someone about it.
That's an excellent point. I'm glad Illy brought that up. Because there's no point in, like, having a bunch of self-loathing about yourself or not feeling comfortable at your particular place of worship. You're supposed to enjoy being at a church or a synagogue or wherever it is that you happen to worship. And if that place just doesn't work for you, don't keep those feelings bottled up inside. Talk to someone. We're supposed to help each other with problems, regardless of what they are. But especially when it comes to stuff like spirituality and religion. I mean, that's the best part of being a person, is the fact you can talk to other people to help you. So don't suffer in silence. Seek some help.
Having doubts doesn't make you an evil, irredeemable person.
No, it
And
doesn't.
pushing down those feelings or beating yourself up for having them is only going to make you feel worse.
You
I'm
tell,
grateful
Millie.
my family came to understand where I was coming from.
That's
that
good.
our arguments fizzled out pretty quickly. And I
That's
was
awesome.
able to figure out my faith on my own terms.
That's
But
great.
that's not how that story ends for millions of others. Religious trauma isn't an easy thing to talk about, but it affects 1 in 3 Americans.
Wow.
Recognizing this trauma is important.
Wow, 1 in 3. 33.3 repeating percent. That is a lot of people. That's over 100 million people just in this country alone. I can't imagine how many potentially millions or even billions of people have religious trauma in the rest of the world. This is crazy. It's understandable that happens, but it shouldn't happen, especially not to this grand of a scale.
It's why I made this video in the first place. If someone isn't allowed to discuss these complicated feelings without facing judgment or punishment, they'll have no other choice but to turn on themselves too. Most of all, I want people to know what I wish someone had told me back then. For some people, religion is an essential, everyday part of their lives.
Yeah?
But for others, it's not. And that's okay.
Yes,
Some
it is.
people are lucky to grow up in a faith they are truly aligned with. But not everyone gets that same experience,
That's
no matter
true.
how hard they try to fit in.
Yeah, it's kind of like what I was saying before. It's sometimes that your faith, it just doesn't work for you because not everyone has the same type of mindset. Not everyone thinks the same way. Not everyone experiences the world the same way. So it's understandable that you might not align with the faith of your household and your family. There's going to be some tension. But I think the best thing to do is just figure out a faith that works for you. And if you can't, then you can live life without a faith. Having faith isn't absolutely required to be a good person, like Illy was saying before. It's not an important part of everyone's life. So you're not a failure just because you don't really feel like a real Christian, or you don't feel like a real Jew or a real Muslim or whatever your religion is. Don't feel like a failure. Just try to live your best life.
And believe you me, we try. Not everyone needs a religious practice.
Yeah,
but that
that's
doesn't
true.
make them any less of a good person deserving of a good life.
Yep.
Thank you for watching my videos. Please check the helpful links in the description. And as always, stay safe.
Well, guys, that was another video by ILLY'S. Great video, very educational, and I appreciate the positive messaging that Illy had at the end, that the whole point wasn't to cause controversy or to get in a debate about who's doing religion properly. It's about showing the fact that religious trauma is a thing and that it happens to so many people, and you shouldn't just keep all your emotions bottled up. You should seek help. If you think that your faith isn't working for you, or the particular church you go to just isn't working for you, say something. Don't think, oh, this is fine, and just continue to suffer in silence. That doesn't help anyone. Seek help when you can, and try to figure out what type of mindset works best for you. All in all, great video. Let me know in the comments below. Do you know anyone who's had any religious trauma? And if so, how have they dealt with it? Are they currently seeking help? And if you have any other recommendations for ILLY'S reactions, let me know in the comments below as well. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!